let's start in now in chapter 10. Now, I, Paul, myself, entreat you by the meekness and gentleness of Christ, I, who in your presence am lowly among you, but being absent am of good courage towards you. Now, let's stop right here. Here is where he starts in with his sarcasm. And you have to look at his answers to see the sarcasm or the irony that he has here. Now, let's suppose that Ryan has been making some accusation against me when I'm gone. I go letter, and it's you need to straighten up your life in here. And then I hear that Ryan, he gets up and he says, now, listen to me here. Don't listen to Lowell. Oh, Lowell, he can write a real stinging letter. Have you ever noticed that? While he's away, he can really write a stinging letter. But when he's here, you ever noticed how meek and gentle and mousy he is? And he won't, in other words, he can write that letter, but when he's here, now, I hear that. See, I hear that he said that. You would understand what I meant when I came back and when I said, now, I'm here. And now then, I'm here to talk with you. I, who, when I'm away from you, I write those real stinging letters. But when I'm here, I don't have much courage. You see how I'm getting at him? In other words, I've heard it, so I'm getting back at this. This is what Paul is doing. And you'll see this as it builds up more and more and more and more down here. In a little while, he's just plainly going to tell us that's what they say. See, so I'm not guessing at it. He's going to tell us that this is the way they're saying. So now then, he said, I, who in your presence am lowly among you, being absent, I am of good courage towards you. So just mark it down. He doesn't mean that. See, that's irony. That's sarcasm that he's giving in here. Now he goes ahead and he says, yea, I beseech you that I may not, when present, show courage with the confidence wherewith I count to be bold against some, who count of us as if we walk according to the flesh. So now, I don't want to be so bold, as really and hard when I get there, as I might have to be. And he says, I count to bold against some, and they account, in other words, these people look at me and count of me here, who count of us as if we walked according to the flesh. Now, these people are living according to the flesh. They're not living according to the gospel of Christ. They're fighting these battles according to fleshly battles. Now, there's two ways that you can fight a fleshly battle. One is what's going on in Iraq right now. The other way is that if let's say, I'm picking on Ryan tonight, Ryan and I are having a lot of problems here. Now, I then can turn around and I take vengeance on him and I tell some lies about him and I insinuate certain things and make you believe certain things are wrong. In other words, I'm going to tear him up. I'm going to tear his reputation down. Now, I'm not going to take a gun and shoot him. That would be a worldly fight. But what would you call this other one? Now, Ryan's trying to be nice to me, and he tries to do what Christ would have him. And when I do him evil, he does me good. But I'm trying to destroy him. Well, he's fighting the battle according to the teachings of Christ. I'm fighting it according to the teachings of my flesh. I'm doing what I would like to do. What's the first thing that comes to your mind if somebody ever cheats you or lies about you or does something evil to you? What's the first thing that enters your mind? Is, see, in here. And the teachings of Christ don't just come normal. We have to put them in our mind to live by them. Now then, he said, for though we walk in the flesh, now Paul said, I do walk in the flesh, I'm a fleshly man. For though we walk in the flesh, and then you notice the parenthesis, for our weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but mighty before God to the casting down of strongholds. Now, the weapons I use, even though I'm a fleshly man, I don't use these fleshly weapons of lying and cheating and trying to ruin people and so forth. But the weapons that I use are mighty before God to casting down of strongholds. Now, what is it that if I really want to do, if you do me real bad harm, what do I need to do to cast coals of fire upon your head? To really, really make you feel bad, really tear you down, see? Do you good. Peter says, if somebody does harm, do you good. He said, for that cast coals of fire up on their head. What will happen if you do me harm, and since Ryan and I do him harm, and so he comes back and does me harm. He tells a bigger lie on me than I did on him. Now then I'll do this, and I'll go back. What's going to happen? See? We're just going to destroy each other. But if Ryan really wants to cast it down and destroy me, then he uses the weapons of Christ. I'm trying to destroy him by my lies and so forth, and he does me good. How will that make me feel? Let's take Stephen. Remember Stephen in Acts 7? When they were stoning him? How do you think he felt as they were stoning him and giving all those accusations? But he looked up into heaven, and it said he saw the Lord, and he bowed down, and he prayed. And he said, Lord, receive me into your hands. He didn't curse them. What did Jesus do on the cross? Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. These are weapons of the Spirit that really, really destroy an enemy. So he said, that's the kind that we use. He said, casting down imaginations. Now those are thoughts of the mind. That's when Ryan does that to me, acts the way Christ would have me to do. What he's doing is casting down my plans against him. He's destroying all the plans, all of my thoughts. That's the idea of imaginations here. That's what it means. All of my thoughts and all of my plans, and every high thing that is exalted against the knowledge of God, and bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So, if he does me good, he uses all of those principles that the Lord teaches. Whatsoever you would have men to do unto you, do unto them. Somebody does you evil, you do them good. He's going to destroy my vicious attitude and attacked on him here, and then he will bring in here every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. So that's what Paul's saying that he does. I don't fight you people on the same battle that you fight me. Now that's the way that you judge, is what he's telling these enemies here. All right, let's continue on. And being in readiness to avenge all disobedience when your obedience shall be made full. Now Paul said, I bring every thought into captivity. I make sure that I think all these right thoughts, and then I am ready to avenge you. I'm ready to avenge you here. And here, how does he put it? All disobedience, I'm going to avenge all disobedience when your obedience shall be made full. Now, first of all, what does avenge mean? I'm going to avenge your disobedience. If I'm doing all of this to Ryan, Ryan does me good. I tell lies on him. I do all this. How could you avenge, now what does that mean? My disobedience. Avenge means what? It means to make just, to do what is right. So he's going to have to correct that, and he's going to do what's right. Let's suppose he comes to me, as the Lord tells him to do, and says, Lowell, you have offended me, you've sinned against me, you've lied in here, and I say, I have not, and get out of here. Then he goes, and he gets 2 or 3, he brings them with him, and he talks to me, and tries to reason with him, with the plurality of people, and I say, not so. Then he brings it to the church, as the Lord said, and said, now here's what Lowell has done, here's what he said about me, and it is not true, and here are the witnesses out here. And so the church then comes to me, and the church says, Lowell, we love you, but you need to straighten up your life. And if you don't, what's the next step that the church is going to do? Going to count me as a Gentile, withdraw from me. Now I got a problem. I'm either going to be withdrawn from, or what will I do? I'll change my evil ways. See? Now, if I change my evil ways, what has Ryan done to me? See? He has avenged my disobedience. Now, he's saying here, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold you false teachers accountable when I come, but I'm going to do it when the church's obedience is full. Which means that at this particular time, there were people there that were riding the fence, these false teachers coming in, telling things about Paul that are lies, trying to get the people away from him, and Paul's telling them the truth, and these people are analyzing this, and Paul is saying, I'm not coming and doing this right now. Because if I did, I know I would tear up a lot of people. But when your obedience is made full, when you've been given the opportunity to see the situation, and so that you know what it is, then I'm going to act. And I'll see that these false teachers are, their false doctrine is made known to them. So you don't just jump in and start withdrawing from people. A lot of times when you do that, the families and friends of that person will also leave. You have to prepare people. And that's what Paul is saying. That I'm preparing you. But I want you to know, what he's saying is, I'm not a coward. And when I come, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do what I told you in that stinging letter. Now, what stinging letter is he talking about? What letter would they be saying, oh, he's a real stinging letter? The 1 Corinthian letter. He told them, he said, shall I come to you in gentleness or with a stick? See? Now, how do you want me to come? See? And so what he's telling them is that you can be assured that that's what I will do. Now he says in verse 7, you look at the things that are before your face. Now he's talking about the enemy here, and that means you're looking at things just as they are right now. You're not looking an inch beyond your nose. You're not looking at the future. You're just looking at and judging by yourself is what you're doing. He said, if any man trusteth in himself that he is Christ, let him consider this again with himself, that even as he is Christ, so also are we. So here are these false teachers coming in. They're claiming to be of Christ. We're of Christ. And you know, Paul, he's out there. Well, what Paul is saying, you're judging yourself by your own face. And he's going to get into this in just a little bit more. You're doing it just by the physical things that you've got around you, your successes, and you say that you're of Christ. Well, let me tell you, I also am of Christ. Then in verse 8, he says, for though I should glory somewhat abundantly concerning our authority, which the Lord gave for building you up and not for casting you down, I shall not be put to shame. Now, here it is. He calls their attention now to this, and keep in mind, he's talking to these enemies. He says in here, for though I should glory somewhat abundantly concerning our authority. What could Paul have bragged on about being an authoritative person? He was an apostle, wasn't he? See? And he could have bragged about that. And he could have said, let me tell you people something. I'm not going to put up with this. I'm an apostle of Jesus Christ. And here's what he says. And he said, I could do that. I could brag about the authority. But he said, here's the problem with it. Which the Lord gave for building up and not for casting down. Now the Lord gave me this authority as an apostle. And this authority was given to me to build you up and not to cast you down. Paul knew what would happen to the church if at this time he used his apostolic authority and said, okay, this is the way it's going to be, bang, bang, bang. It could tear up the church. These people, even though they've repented of the things that he's talking about, they still have this false teaching element in the church. That's what he's dealing with here. He'll get into it more and more all the time. And that's the reason I want to cover both chapters tonight, so you can see the whole thing. So here it is, you have these false teachers, and there are people in there that are wondering who is true and who is false, which is it that is in here. And so Paul said, I have the authority, and I know that, but if I used it to my full right now, I'd tear up the church. God gave it to me so I can build up the church. Then he says, I could brag about this or glory about this authority. Then he goes ahead and he says, I shall not be put to shame, that I may not seem as if I would terrify you by my letters. For his letters, they say, are weighty and strong, but his bodily presence is weak, and his speech is of no account. Do you see what he's doing? In other words, he's quoting these false teachers. That's what these false teachers are saying. You see how strong Paul is when he's away? Well, he'll write that 1 Corinthian letter. Boy, he's tough when he's away. His letters are weighty and they're strong. But when if he came to meet me, you just watch when he comes to meet me, you just see who's the strongest, see? And have you ever heard a guy preach? He's a lousy preacher. He's just not worth anything in speaking, you see. Now, this is what they're saying about Paul. Paul, he quotes them, and so you have to put that in there. Let's suppose that I'm going here and I write this letter back, and Ryan is back here and he's getting you all stirred up and everything. And as he's stirring you up, why he's getting up here and he's saying, now don't pay any attention to Lowell. He's just a big blowhard when he's away, but when he's here, you just watch what happens when he comes and faces me when he comes back. And have you ever noticed really what great sermons I'm preaching? That's Ryan. See, you ever noticed what great sermons I'm preaching? Have you ever heard Lowell preach? Isn't that lousy? Huh? And so I come back and I stand up and say, okay, now I'm here. Now I'm here. I'm the guy that is really tough when I'm away, but when I'm here I'm really weak. And you know the guy who can't preach very well? You just see me, you see. And of course Ryan would just melt in his seat because he knows that I know what he's been saying. See, this is the irony of this thing that he's going through. So now this doesn't mean that his speech is of no account. That's what his enemies are saying. He doesn't know how to speak. He's not a good speaker. Paul said, let such a one reckon this, that what we are in word by letters, when we're absent, such are we also indeed when we're present. So he said, now you people can just mark this down. What I am in my words when I'm away writing a letter, that's exactly the kind of man I am when I'm present in the works or the deeds that I do. Then he says, for we're not bold to number or compare ourselves with certain of them that commend themselves, but they themselves, measuring themselves by themselves and comparing themselves with themselves, are without understanding. Now Paul said, I want to tell you how I am not like those guys. They say that I write a letter and this and that and all this, but I'll tell you one way of which I'm not like them. He said, we're not so bold as to number or compare ourselves with ourselves. They compare themselves with themselves. They measure themselves with themselves. Now, when you measure yourself with yourself and you're the standard of perfection, what do you always come out with? See? Every morning I look in the mirror and I know I'm the best looking man in the world. So what do I see? Best looking man in the world. If that's the standard that I'm going to use. And so Paul said, we're not that bold, see, to measure ourselves by ourselves. Let's suppose that this group in here tonight, we've come to the conclusion we're the finest group in the whole world. There's nobody else, there's no other Bible class, there's no other church that is as good and nice as we are. We are, in fact, we have arrived. We have arrived. So now then, what do we have to say about our Bible class? How good is it? Perfect. What about our worship? Perfect. What about the works we do? Oh, absolutely fabulous, see, in there. And so if this is the way we compare ourselves, if that's a comparison, you always come out a winner. And Paul said, that's what you people do. You false teachers are so egotistical that you think that you are the standard, and so when you measure yourself by yourself, then you come out. So Paul said this, but we will not glory beyond our measure. Paul said, now I'm not going to brag beyond our measure of what, when you measure my life, you measure what I've done, I'm not going to brag beyond what I've done. For instance, if I wanted, Ryan and I are in an argument here, and I want to prove to you that I have accomplished more than Ryan, so I say, now let's look at what I have done in my life. So I start out and I state a few facts. Now, if I don't have real integrity, what will I go ahead and do just to put some salt and pepper on it? See? I'll go ahead and take credit for other things that I didn't do. You see? Take credit for that. Now, Paul said, that's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to stretch myself over what you can measure over what I have actually done. Now he's getting ready to compare and show in this way here. So he says, but we will not glory beyond our measure, but according to the measure of the province which God apportioned to us as a measure to reach unto you. Now, what he's saying is, Paul's saying, here's the word, here's the way that I will measure my accomplishments. I'll measure them just exactly by the extent of the measuring standard of what I've actually done. Just what I've actually done. Now, God has given me a job. And the job that he's given me, well, what would the job be that God gave Paul to do? See? Is to go preach the whole world, to go preach up in this certain area. Had God been guiding Paul and telling him, don't go here, but go here? So he says, God has apportioned this, and God has directed me to preach as far as you people are, over this far. This is as far west. But I'm the guy that came, I'm the guy that preached, I'm the guy that established the Corinthian church, I'm the guy that established up here at Thessalonica, I'm the guy who did this work. And I'm not going to brag about works that I haven't done. Now, obviously, they have been. These people would follow Paul around. So you pick up the statements that he makes. They follow him around. He does all of the bad works. He gets the beatings, and he gets thrown in jail, and then he gets to starve, and then they come in, and they reap all of the rewards. And then they will take the credit for the work done in that congregation. Look what we've done, see? Look at how many places I've preached. Yeah, in all of this comfort, following me around and doing this. So Paul said, when I'm going to compare myself now, and he's getting ready, I'm not going to extend it above what you can measure and what you can see that I have actually done. So he said, for we stretch not ourselves overmuch, as though we preached not unto you, for we came even as far as unto you in the gospel of Christ, not glorying beyond our measure, that is, in other men's labors, but having hope that as your faith groweth, we shall be magnified in you according to our province unto further abundance. So Paul said, now I did come to you, I preached to you, I established this, and I'm not like other people. Now notice here, see, this is where he puts it in here, verse 15, not glorying beyond our measure, that is, in other men's labors. Now, when Paul came and he established the Corinthian church, the church in various cities there, these people came in and they preached there. They would take the credit of, we're the ones who actually established and built up this church. So Paul's saying, that's not the way I measure it. I'm measuring it of the work that I've actually done. These people are coming along, heaping themselves on my work and taking the claim for it, is really what they were doing. Now in 16, he says, so as to preach the gospel even unto the parts beyond you. Now this is my plans. I preached the gospel up to you as far as Corinth, and I have plans to preach beyond you and not to glory in another man's province in regard of things ready to our hand. So I plan on going out, extending my labors on out, up into Spain and so forth, and I'm not going to go out and build on a congregation that somebody else has already established. I'm not going to go over somewhere where Peter has done all of his work, build up a congregation. I go in and say, look what I've done, you see, to this thing. Then he says, but he that glorieth, let him glory in the Lord. For not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord commendeth. So he said, just remember this. When we're in this bragging business, and Paul is working up to bragging, and boy, you ain't seen nothing yet. We're going to start bragging here in a minute. But he's working up to bragging. Now he said, let's just remember one thing. When you start bragging, remember this. For he that commendeth himself, he that commendeth for not he that commendeth himself is approved, but whom the Lord approveth. So now when I start bragging, telling you what good things I've done, I need to remember that just because I brag on me doesn't prove anything. What is it that makes the difference? It's whom the Lord approves. The Lord has to do the approving. The Lord knows what the truth is. So when we're bragging, we better watch it, because you can brag, you can do this. I can take credit for every congregation in the Northwest. You say, Lowell, what have you done? Well, I've established every congregation in Washington, Oregon, and while I'm at it, I'll take Idaho too. See? And I've done all of this, and I've done that, and extended way out. Boy, that really sounds there. Now, I've taken the claim. Now, how much credit am I going to get in heaven? See? Nothing. That doesn't make any difference. It's the Lord knows what I've done. The Lord knows what Paul has done. So Paul says, now when you get ready to brag, you need to keep that in mind. The Lord knows what we've done. So now, chapter 11, and you'll see now why I wanted to cover these two together, really gets into it. He said, would that. That means I wish, I want. Would that you could bear with me in a little foolishness. For indeed you do bear with me. So now Paul says, now I'm getting ready to do some real foolish talking. I'm going to act like a fool here in a minute. And I hope that you'll bear with me in my foolish talking. And what he's getting ready to do is brag. See? He's getting ready to brag. And let's notice how he does this. He said, now, I'm getting ready to do this, and I hope that you will bear with me. Then he tells them why. Now, here's the reason that I'm going to do this. By the way, before we get any farther, isn't this kind of out of character for Paul to brag on himself? For him to tell what a great person he is? Well, this is what he's building up to. And he's going to stop over and over and say, isn't this foolish? I feel like a fool. See? But what he's saying is, now, I'm getting ready to brag. And he said, and let me tell you why I'm going to brag. I'm going to brag because I'm so jealous over you with a godly jealousy. I love you so much. I don't want to lose you. I don't want the congregation to go away. And he said, here's the situation with you, the Corinthian church, and me, Paul. For I am jealous over you with a godly jealousy, for I espoused you unto one husband, that I might present you a pure virgin to Christ. Now, we could stop and talk a long time about espousing. We're not going to do it tonight. That's not the point. If you want to get into some details, go back to Matthew, the class on Matthew, and read it and listen in there in the first chapter where Mary and Joseph were espoused one to the other. We go into it. Now, espousal was a period of time, generally a year's period of time, when a man and a woman is getting ready to get married. And the parents will make the agreement, and they make the agreement that, okay, they're going to get married. And then they do get married. In other words, legally, they are married. Then they had a period which was generally a year. That's what their custom was a year. And then in a year from now, the man then, during this year, he builds him a house, he gets everything ready for his bride. And then a year from today, he will go over and get her and bring her back over to his house. And then they start living as husband and wife. But that's not the day they're married. The day they're married is that day that they are espoused. Now that year in between this agreement and when they start living together, that year is called an espousal period. That they're espoused. That is, they're married, but they're not living together. Now, during this espousal period of 1 year, if they have problems somehow and they decide not to get married, they had to go through the same divorce procedure as somebody who had been married for 50 years. In other words, they were legally married, but they were espoused. Now, Paul said, I espoused you to Christ. I married you to Christ. I'm like the bridegroom in the story of Jesus. I'm like the bridegroom of giving you the bride, and you're espoused. Now, the church was espoused to Christ. When is the church going to start living with Christ? See? Actually living, see? When he comes back and gets it and takes us to heaven, you see there. So the espousal period, that's the period really that we're in right now. So are we the wife of Christ? Yep, we're the wife of Christ. So what he says is, now I espoused you to one husband, Christ. He said, but I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve in his craftiness, your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity and purity that is toward Christ. So what I am scared of, what I'm jealous over, I'm afraid that you people, just like Eve was deceived, just like Satan was able to deceive Eve, I'm afraid that you people will be deceived by these false teachers in here, and he'll corrupt your minds from the simplicity and purity that is toward Christ. Paul said it's not a complicated thing to get into Christ, to understand He's the Son of God, to get into Christ, to accept Him and worship Him and live according to His life. It's not a complicated thing. Now, we can make it complicated, but he says it's not a complicated thing. And I'm afraid that people are going to come in and they're going to lead you away from this and the purity that is in Christ, so that you'll end up doing things that you shouldn't be doing. So what Paul says, he says, I'm jealous over you, afraid that you will be led away from Jesus Christ at this period of time. Now then, in verse 4, he says something interesting. For if he that cometh preacheth another Jesus, whom we did not preach, or if ye received a different spirit, which ye did not receive, or a different gospel, which ye did not accept, you do well to bear with him. Now, if you read that out of this context, here's what it says. It says if somebody comes and teaches another Jesus, and they give you another spirit other than the Holy Spirit in here, then in here, or another gospel, and they preach another gospel, you would do well to bear with them and listen to them. Now, that's what that says, isn't it? Now, I understand Galatians 1 says exactly the opposite, and you do too. But that's what that verse says. So, if a teacher comes in and teaches another Jesus, listen to him. Bear with him. Or another Holy Spirit, or another gospel. Bear with him. Now, when you understand it in the context of irony, in the context of condemning these people, then it makes good sense. Now, Paul said, look, church, now here he's preaching, now then he's making these comments to his friends. Look, I came in and I preached to you Jesus Christ. I gave you the Holy Spirit. How did Paul impart the Holy Spirit to him? Laying on his hands. I gave you the Holy Spirit. I preached to you the gospel. Then I went away. Now, if these guys came in, and if they came in and taught you another Jesus that I didn't teach you, in other words, if I didn't teach you everything about him, and so there's two Jesuses, or if they laid their hands on you and gave you another spirit that I didn't give you because I wasn't capable, and if they preached to you another gospel, was able to prove, you see, it's true that I didn't preach to you, then I only preached to you half of the gospel. Now, if they could come in and they could show you that I only gave you half of Jesus, half of the Spirit, and half of the gospel, then you'd do well to bear with them. You'd say, well, that lousy Paul. See? But the fact of the case is, when these people came in, did they preach another Jesus, or did they preach the same one Paul preached? Same one. When they talked about the Holy Spirit, did they talk about the Holy Spirit Paul had given them, or did they teach something new? Same one. When they preached the gospel, did they preach something new, or did they preach the same one? Paul, these people, Paul says, have not brought to you anything that I didn't give you, and yet you are turning away from me. The guy that came to you, preached to you first, gave you all of these blessings, and now you're turning away to go with these guys who haven't done one thing for you except brag on themselves and take your money. That's all that they've done. Now, if they actually did you some good, see, that's what he means. Does everybody understand that? Where he's talking about it here? So, if that's so, you do good. Then he says, the very next verse, He said, "For I reckon that I am not one whit behind the very chiefest apostles." Now, he's not talking about the 12 apostles. He's talking about these chief apostles. That word chief means super. It means the highest elevation that you can get. So here it is, Paul comes in, and what kind of an apostle was he? Well, he's an apostle of Christ. Was he a cocky, egotistical man? No, he was humble. But now then these guys come in, and they come in with their letters, and they say, well, Paul, he wasn't even down there studying with Peter and the other apostles. He didn't even live in that enge. And look what I've done. I know Peter personally. I've been down there. I've studied with him. I've done this. I've done that. And boy, look at all the stuff here that I've got. And so when you want to talk about an apostle, you look at me. How great I am better than what he is. I'm better than what he is. We'll see. They make statements in here in just a minute about one of the reasons, evidently, that they could prove to the church that they were better is because Paul didn't take your money, but I will, which shows I'm better, you see. And so he says, I'm not one whit behind the very chiefest. He's talking about these guys who claim to be super apostles. So he said, I want you to know, see, as you add all this thing together, when I get there, I'll be the same guy that I am in the letter. And I'm going to hold you responsible for these things. And they did not give you anything that I didn't give you. I'm not one whit behind the very chiefest of these guys. But though I be rude in speech, yet I am not in knowledge. Now, I don't believe for a minute that he means that he was rude in speech. The word for rude there means common, ordinary. It means the opposite of excellent and good is what it means. If you take a carpenter, I can do carpenter work. Well, what kind of carpenter are you, Lowell? I'm this kind, right here. Well, what is that? Well, there are carpenters that are very skilled. They do excellent work. I'm the other kind. I'm down here where I can build it. It stands up for a while before it falls down. See? I'm an electrician, just like Dave is back there. What's the difference? Well, I'm this kind of electrician. Now, if you want it done good and right and according to code, everything proper, get Dave. But if you want your lights to burn, I can do it just as good as Dave. So you say you are an electrician. Yes, yeah, I'm a rude electrician. That's what this means, see? It means the opposite of that which is good. So now, Paul is not saying in this context, I can't preach at all, see? But what is it these people have been saying about him that we've already learned? See? Oh, how bad he is at speaking, and speech, down in verse 10, is of no account. And so then he starts out, and this is a dig that he gives them. Though I be rude in speech, I'm not in knowledge. Nay, in every way we have made this manifest unto you in all things. In other words, in every way that I was there, I made it known to you. You know that I am not one whit behind them in knowledge of anything. They haven't taught you one thing that I haven't taught you. Then he said, oh, maybe there was something. Now remember, this is all irony. Maybe there was something that I did to you that they didn't do, that I offended you. I want to apologize. Or did I commit a sin in abasing myself that you might be exalted? Because I preached to you the gospel of God for naught? Maybe that was my big mistake. Maybe I didn't treat you right, because I abased myself and I exalted you and I preached to you the gospel and didn't charge you. So I'll bet that's why. See? Well, what does this tell you these other guys are doing? See, as he throws this irony out to them. Then verse 8 he said, I robbed other churches, taking wages of them that I might minister unto you. And when I was present with you, and And when I was present to you and was in want or need, I was not a burden on any man. For the brethren, when they came from Macedonia, supplied the measure of my want, and in everything I kept myself from being a burden unto you, and so will I keep myself. As the truth of Christ is in me, no man shall stop me of this glorying in the regions of Achaia. Now, let me put this together. He's going down here and he's trying to tell them, they haven't done one thing for you that I didn't do. They didn't teach you a new Jesus. They didn't give you a new spirit. They didn't give you a new gospel. They haven't done one thing. I'm not one whit behind them in any way. They haven't done one thing. Oh, maybe there is one thing. Maybe there is one thing. That I exalted you too highly. You know, I know you wouldn't like that. And I based myself, and I didn't take anything from you. In fact, I robbed other churches, taking wages. See, the robbing, he didn't cheat them. Taking wages is what you deserve. Taking wages of them. Now, we'll not take time to go into it tonight, but if you want to find out where that is, in Philippians 4:15, Paul, when he writes to the Philippians, he tells them that he didn't take any money from anybody except them while he was up there in Macedonia. And then you can put it all together and find the Philippian church, when Paul and Titus came down when Timothy, it's time for me to quit teaching. When Timothy and Silas came down, they brought money from Philippi. Now, you don't read that in Acts, see? But when he writes back to the Philippian church, he does tell them that. So that's what he's talking about. What he's saying is, I didn't take money from you. I did take money from the Philippian church so I could preach to you for nothing. Excuse me for treating you so badly, see, of not doing that. And then to let them know that he didn't mean it when he's apologizing for it, he said, I didn't take anything from anybody when I was in need because they came down, they supplied it, and now then, nobody is going to stop me from glorying or bragging about that in Achaia. I'll never take a dime from you people. I may take it from Philippi, but not from you people. Because I know that if I take money from you, then you're going to use that to try to say, I'm a false teacher. Now, in verse 10, as the truth of Christ is in me, no man shall stop me of this glory in the regions of Achaia. Wherefore? Why? Why is it I won't take any money from you? Because I love you not? Is it because I don't love you? God knoweth, and what I do, that I will do, that I may cut off occasion from them that desire an occasion, and wherein they glory, they may be found even as we. So why is it that I'm not going to take any money? Why is it I will not take any money? Is it because I don't love you? No. It's because I'm going to cut off every occasion that these false teachers have. Because I know that if I start accepting your money, they will use that to say, see, Paul's just preaching for money. So he says, I will not do it. Now, we have to go back and we have to remember the Corinthian church. What's their basis? What kind of people are they to start with? Now, they did straighten up these messes, but what kind of people are they? See? They've been worldly people. They've been people that are carnal, not spiritual. And so Paul says, that's the reason. Then I want you to notice in here, he says in verse 13, now he really hits these guys on the head. These are the guys he's been talking to. These are the guys he's been sarcastic with. He says in verse 13, for such men are false apostles. You see, these guys have been claiming to be apostles. And back up here in verse 5, when Paul said, I'm not one whit behind the chiefest apostles, that's the guy he's talking about. These super duper apostles, these false guys that comes in. He says, for such men are false apostles, deceitful workers, fashioning themselves into apostles of Christ. They're not apostles of Christ. They're fashioning themselves into apostles of Christ. Fashioning yourself is what movie stars do when they put on everything that they need to put on so that they look like somebody else. And so these false apostles, they will fashion themselves by their humility and so forth. Paul talks about the Colossians, he said, fashioning themselves to apostles of Christ. And no marvel, don't be amazed at that, for even Satan fashioneth himself into an angel of light. It's no great thing, therefore, if his ministers also fashion themselves as ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. So these guys, when they come in, yeah, they fashion themselves, they act like they're apostles, but they're false apostles, they're deceitful workers. So don't get upset when you say, when I'm telling you that there are false apostles, there are deceitful workers, there's ministers of Satan in the church. Don't get upset. Paul said, that's where you find them. That's where they're going to be. See? That's where they're going to be, and acting as though they're righteous people. I saw something just absolutely sickening 3 or 4 weeks ago. I flipped over to Larry King. Watch him very seldom, but he was talking to a Catholic and a Jew, and there was a member of the church and a Methodist bishop, and a bishop over the Methodist church where President Bush, is supposed to give allegiance to. And so they were talking about the war. And they were talking about this and that, and well, what about this? And so then King got down and said, well, what about Islam? Said, is it a true religion? Is it, it's a wonderful, wonderful, peaceful, loving religion, And well, you don't condemn the clerics, and so, they're some of the finest men that I've ever seen. It's a loving religion, and I got to give it to old King. He's a big liberal himself and a mushy mouth and all of this, but it kind of amazed him, so he kept asking, well, what do you think here? Do you think, certainly if you've got the truth, you think they're of the devil or something, don't you? And so there was a man who's the community church preacher, and he's the only guy on that board that says they are of the devil. The Lord says, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man cometh unto me, and so forth. And he said, yeah, they are. There's, they're fine. And so, this bishop, he was wanting Bush to come talk to him, about this. And so Larry said then, so you think that the Islam religion is as good as the Christian religion? He said, look, my God is so loving that he encompasses all religions. He said, don't tell me my God is not that loving. Okay? So he encompasses the religion of Islam. Oh, he encompasses all religions. Oh, he was just so sweet. Had on his collar, had on everything to show it. It just made you sick. See? And I was thinking about this. Oh, man. That's here. And then King and them talking. Well, it's something. Here it is, all these Christians and people would call in. What are we supposed to believe? Because all of the reverends up here are believing this thing and all of this, and what are we supposed to believe? Right? Well, poor thing, just a deceit. Well, that's what he's saying right here. He's saying that's where you're going to find the ministers of Satan. So if you ever want to go look for a minister of Satan, don't go to the bar, go to church somewhere. And it may be here, but who knows. Now then, in verse 16, I say again, let no man think me foolish, but if you do, yet as foolish receive me. Now he's getting ready to brag some more. You see, he's already told him about going to be a fool up there once. So he said, now, I hope you don't think I'm a fool, but if you do, go ahead and think it, that I may also glory a little. And I'm going to brag. That which I speak not after the Lord. Now, what I'm getting ready to do, I'm going to brag, and this is really not the way the Lord has you to present yourself, not in a braggadocious way. But he says, that which I speak not after the Lord, but as in foolishness, in this confidence in glory. Seeing that many glory after the flesh, I will glory also. For ye bear with the foolish gladly, being wise yourself. Now then, he's starting to tell them why I'm going to glory. I'm going to brag because I see that you like braggarts. When these braggarts come in and they glory of what they've done in the flesh, you listen to them. So evidently you like braggarts, and so if that's what it takes, then I will brag also, so you will listen to me. All irony, see? And he says, of course, one thing that you can do is these people, they're bragging and they're foolish, but you can listen to them because you're wise yourself. See here? You're really wise. You're wise enough to distinguish that. Then he says, you bear with the man if he brings you into bondage, if he devoureth you, if he taketh you captive, if he exalteth himself, if he smites you in the face. Paul said it's amazing. You people are so wise that if a guy comes in and brings you into bondage, now what kind of bondage would he be bringing, these people be bringing them into? What laws would they be saddling on their back all the way through the New Testament? The laws of Moses. And what part of the law of Moses especially? Circumcision, see? So they bring you into bondage. If they exalt themselves, if they do all of this, oh, you listen to that kind. Now he said, I speak by way of disparagement, as though we had been weak. So this is not the way that you should speak. Yet, whereinsoever any is bold, I speak in foolishness. I'm bold. You see, Paul can't even brag without, he starts out and bragging, then he stops right in the middle of it in here, and he says, in here you notice that in verse 21, the latter part, yet wherein any is bold, I speak in foolishness. I am bold also. Meaning, I'm going to brag also. Let's get in a bragging contest, okay? Because with you, Church at Corinth, with you, you're so wise that I can see that what you like is the biggest braggart. And that's what you listen to. You listen to guys who do this, trying to make them see themselves ashamed. He said now the rest of this chapter, we're going to go through real fast because it's just a bragging contest. That's what Paul's saying. He's saying, are they Hebrews? So am I. In other words, these people come in and they say, I am a Hebrew. I am a Jew, blah, blah. And Paul says, I am too. Are they Israelites? So am I. Are they seed of Abraham? So am I. Are they ministers of Christ? Oh, I speak as one beside himself. What word do we use? We don't use a word. If I tell you Helen is beside herself, what am I saying? She's out of control. She's insane. That's not her. She's acting strange. Paul says, okay, so are they this? So am I. I'm beside myself. I'm insane. I'm talking in this bragging mode in here. He said, I more. In labors more abundantly, in prison more abundantly, in stripes above measure, in deaths often. Of the Jews, 5 times received I 40 stripes, save one. Now the Jewish law was that you could beat a man, but you could only do it with 40 stripes, take 40 whacks at him. So the Jews, in their custom, they then decided, we'll only take 39 just in case we miss something. You know, and if we miss a stripe and we hit 40, and then I missed one, I hit 41, I'm a sinner. So we'll just back it up one, take 39, that way it'll give me a little leeway in there to make a mistake. So he said, I took 39 stripes, and I have been beaten 5 times. 3 times was I beaten with rods. Now this is the way the Romans beat. How many times was Paul beaten? 8 times, up to this point. Now when we studied the book of Acts, we didn't find that many beatings, did we? Which means that Luke didn't tell us all of the beatings and all the things, see? When he wrote the book of Acts, he told us what we needed to know, but he left out a lot of these things that took place. So 8 times, Paul said, I was beaten. Here. He said, 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned, and we know where that was, over at Lystra. Thrice or 3 times I suffered shipwreck. Now we know of one time, don't we? See, in the 27th chapter, 20th chapter there of the book of Acts, he was in a shipwreck. He said, a night and day in the deep, night and day have I been in the deep. One of the shipwrecks I was in, I was bobbling up and down in the Mediterranean Sea all day and all night for 24 hours. I was out there, whether he's holding on to a piece of wood or what he was doing. In other words, he's trying to say, I tell you, if you want to hear bragging, and that's what they do, telling you all the good things they do, and what wonderful people they are, how they're Hebrews and all of this, so am I, and here's the things that I have done in here comparison of them. Then in 26, in journeyings often, in dangers of rivers, in dangers of robbers, in dangers of my countrymen, in dangers of the Gentiles, in dangers of the city, in dangers in the wilderness, in dangers in the sea, dangers among false brethren, in labor and travail. I've had to work and support myself, in watchings often, always having to be on the watch because people are laying out to try to get me, in cold and nakedness. And besides those things, Now, all of those are outward things that I've had to suffer. Besides those things that are without, there is that which presseth upon me daily. Well, what are they? He said, anxiety for all the churches. I've got this great concern for all the churches and all the problems that they're in, and especially you, the Corinthian church, how much anxiety that you brought me. He said, who is weak and I'm not weak? Now, this is on an individual basis. If somebody is weak and they're about to fall away, Paul said, that really bothers me. I'm just like they are. It just really upsets me. I'm not able to see somebody fall away from the Lord and just let it go, and it doesn't bother me. It's what he means by that. Who is caused to stumble and I burn not? Somebody falls away, and I just burn with hurt. If I must needs glory, now then he says, now if I've got to brag, evidently I've got to brag because you people like braggarts. Now, if I must needs glory or brag, I will glory of the things that concern my weakness. The God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, he who blessed forevermore, knoweth that I lie not. So if I'm going to brag, I'll brag about my weakness. So he said, I want to brag about one other thing, and this is a humiliating thing. He said, in Damascus, the governor under Aretas, the king, guarded the city of Damascus in order to take me. And through a basket was I let down in a basket by the wall and escaped his hands. Now, we read about this in the book of Acts, didn't we? See how he had to escape there. That'd be a humiliating thing. I mean, what Paul is saying, he said, I'm bragging about my weakness, my humiliation. And he said, one thing that I'll tell you about being an apostle, the first job I went out on, I went up to Damascus to arrest those Christians, but that's where he was converted. And so I'm up there. And now then, how did this new apostle, how did he leave town? Was it with dignity or was it in humiliation? It was in humiliation. He finally had to go over, and they'd build their houses and so forth up next to the walls around cities, and there'd be a window up there. They got him up, put him in a basket, let him down over the basket, and he had to take off town in a humiliating way. So he said, these are things that I've done. I've really had to suffer for you. And so if you want bragging, I'll brag. But when we're bragging, we're insane. Now, I want to lay the groundwork for next week. Next week, we'll be able to finish the book. I'll lay the groundwork in chapter 12. Let's look at verse 1. I must needs glory. So now I have to glory, I have to brag, though it is not expedient. Bragging is not an expedient way of going about something. If we're going to try to build up this church, do we want to bring preachers in here who are braggers and telling and brag about what great things they've done? Is that how you build it up? See? So no, but I've got the glory, see, in your spatial case, because that's what you're after, but it's not expedient. But I will come to visions and revelations of the Lord. So now, what does he mean by that? He said, now I'm getting ready, we're going to talk about visions and revelations. Now, what's the context? That's how I want to leave this class. What's the context? Why is he going to bring up visions and revelations? It's to compare his with theirs, isn't it? He's going to say, okay, if they want to brag, now let's come to visions and revelations. I'll tell you what's happened to me, and then you see if anything that great has happened to them. So next week when we start out, we'll be able to start out then realizing in chapter 12, verse 1, when he says, now we come to Revelations, that he's talking about, he's getting ready to tell his experiences, which will be a comparison of their experiences, and his is going to be number one. But if we don't realize he's in this bragging mode, and it's in this sarcasm tone in here, and you just start reading chapter 12, you wouldn't have any idea what he's talking about then. Okay, there's where we'll end tonight.